Kappa briefly summarizes for everyone the achievements of the Misty Mountains mutant beasts after their battle with the 12 gods of Azure Star, using this very image, after sending 5 gods to hell, including the god of nature and the god of dreams. There were still 7 gods remaining. With the power enhanced by the fallen gods, the battle only grew more intense, the difficulty kept escalating. And anyone who faced the remaining 7 gods felt an overwhelming pressure. Flashing back a few decades, when the world had just entered the early stage of the spiritual energy outbreak, chaos and terror engulfed everything, smoke and fire filled the air, the atmosphere was dark and thick with the stench of blood. This was the first time a wave of spiritual energy struck without warning. Humans were the first victims, suffering the highest numbers of casualties, devoured, killed, or gravely wounded. The early stage energy surge caused other creatures to grow exponentially in size and become bloodthirsty, turning humans into prey. At that time, the concept of superhumans didn't exist yet. The mutant beasts attacked overnight, and all the humans could do was run for their lives. A large city might be reduced to just a handful of survivors. Among the ruins, a young man ran frantically, his face covered in blood. He had no idea what had happened to the world, why it had turned into this nightmare. Wearing only a pair of pants, his upper body was wrapped in white bandages, one eye severely wounded. He sprinted through the chaos of screams, destruction, and monstrous beasts rampaging all around. The creatures were too busy feasting on others to notice him, for now, but fear still lurked everywhere. In his heart, he called out a name. Annie! You must be safe. With that, he forced himself to keep running toward Annie's house, hoping to find her among the smoldering ruins. He ran and ran, the road seeming endless, until his blood-soaked eye widened in horror. Blocking his path was a colossal mutant beast, as tall as a 5-story building. It had raised its head, something dangling from its jaws. Even against the backlight, he could see it clearly. A girl, strands of golden hair peeked out from between the beast's fangs, a bloodied, limp arm hanging lifelessly. He wanted to believe it wasn't her, wanted to deny it. But the bracelet on her wrist confirmed everything. The person in the monster's mouth was Annie, his last hope for survival. He stood frozen, staring. The crunching of steel-like teeth sinking into flesh was disturbingly clear, but he refused to hear it. It wasn't until the beast swallowed her whole, its throat bulging for a moment before she disappeared inside, that the young man's jaw finally moved. He tried to speak, starting with an A, then an but no words came out. Then, as if his brain finally registered what had just happened, he let out an earth-shattering scream. He roared with every ounce of strength in his lungs, partly from terror, partly from unbearable pain. The overwhelming emotions resonated with the surrounding energy, causing it to flood into his body. In an instant, his body absorbed the energy, fusing it with his rage, and he awakened as a superhuman. That was the tragic past of a sad boy. The moment Yui became a superhuman, it turned out that his fully bandaged look wasn't a fashion statement. It had become a part of his very being when he transformed. He didn't choose magnetic manipulation. He discovered his ability to control metal the moment his energy erupted. Over time, as his power grew, Yui mastered his control over projectiles, becoming a pillar of humanity's superhumans. Eventually, he rose to be one of the strongest warriors of Misty Mountains. This time, he still wielded dozens of energy-infused projectiles, fighting to protect Earth's fate in a distant war. His opponent, the god of death, leading a horde of monstrous, skeletal abominations. Explosions roared as energy bullets clashed with the monstrous army, igniting a sea of fire. The god of death's minions were instantly obliterated. Despite their master's name, they were clearly susceptible to physical destruction. Amidst the storm of gunfire and flames, only the god of death stood unharmed. He swung his staff with great force, creating a white energy shield to protect himself from the searing heat. Just in time to see a masked warrior charging toward him, Yui attacked relentlessly, without hesitation, one strike after another. His assaults were rapid and merciless. The god of death activated his defense mode immediately. A swirling purple shield materialized, forming an impenetrable barrier. At least, that was the plan. But Yui was faster. A devastating punch shattered the shield and smashed into the god's face. twisting it sideways. The god's eyes widened in shock. His supposedly unbreakable defense had been breached. He himself had been struck. This couldn't go on. Summoning two colossal spectral beast heads, the god of death commanded them to charge energy orbs in their gaping maws, targeting Yui directly. He didn't care that he was within range himself. He simply unleashed the devastating blasts to annihilate Yui. Thick smoke billowed, obscuring vision. The beasts stood ready to launch another round, but their target was nowhere to be seen. Even the god of death was puzzled. Dead already? Just from that? No, something was off. Yui's energy hadn't disappeared. His presence flickered faintly within the smoke, but something felt unnatural. A decoy? The realization hit the god of death in an instant. He had been fighting a clone all along. And then, stepping out of the mist, silent as a shadow, was Yui himself. He had no need for grand speeches or victorious laughter, just a calm, deadly presence. If it were any other mutant beast, he said, voice chilling, this might have been a difficult fight, but it's different for me. I might actually be able to defeat you. Before the words had fully left his lips, his hand was already raised, summoning dozens of powerful energy attacks aimed straight at the god of death's head. Yi's words were humble, but his actions were anything but. Perhaps his humility was too much, making the gods of the city of the dead think he was spouting nonsense. The god of death gripped his staff tightly and let out a deep, throaty chuckle that soon erupted into loud, unrestrained laughter. Someone as serious as Yui couldn't understand what the god of death found so funny. He hadn't said anything amusing. He stopped his attack and asked, "What are you laughing at?" The god of death only laughed harder before replying, "You are truly fascinating." The way he spoke to Yui was as if he were praising a child for singing well. Yui was not a humorous man, but he had more than enough intelligence to recognize condescension when he heard it. His eyes widened, adding an intimidating glare to his expression. "You think I can't kill you?" This time, the god of death said nothing. He simply raised his staff, and a surge of purple energy ignited like flames on a stove, gradually condensing into a large form, a shadowy figure draped in a cloak. But it was unclear what it truly was. The only discernible features were its two glowing eyes and its round, featureless head. "I've already told you, this trick won't work, yet you insist on using it." Yui was about to lunge forward when the god of death suddenly spoke. "I advise you not to attack." As soon as he finished speaking, his gaze shifted to the newly formed figure. It was no longer just a silhouette. It had a pale, human-like arm extending from the cloak. Around its wrist was a familiar purple bracelet. Anyone else might not recognize it, but there was no way Yui wouldn't, no matter how many years had passed. And then there was the golden hair. He had tied it up himself the morning before taking his daughter to school. That golden hair, identical to her mother's. The moment Yui saw it, his face went pale. The cold, unwavering composure he had maintained through countless battles shattered in an instant. It was like seeing a ghost. But was she really a ghost? The bright blue eyes gazed at him with sadness, her lips moving faintly as she whispered, "Father!" Memories from that fateful day came flooding back like a raging torrent. The horror of seeing Annie swallowed whole before erupting into a terrifying superhuman entity. He had slain the monster, rescued his daughter, and held her lifeless body in his arms for what felt like an eternity. He remembered it all too well, how she had stopped breathing, yet her lips still held the faint trace of a smile, as if she knew that her father had evolved, becoming a powerful warrior in this new era. He had mourned his beloved daughter, believing she was lost forever. That was the last time he had seen Annie. How many years had passed? The world had endured 3 spiritual energy waves, countless upheavals, and Yui had crossed galaxies to another world. Only to stand here now, facing his daughter, hearing her call out, "Father!" What kind of cruel joke was this? Even her dress was the same as on that tragic day. But her face. It was void of emotion, staring at him as if he were nothing more than a tree in the wind, as if she hadn't just called him "Father!" Yet Yui still trembled with sorrow, his voice quivering as he whispered, "Annie! My daughter!" His anguish was the god of death's greatest pleasure. He erupted into laughter once more. A touching father-daughter reunion after all these years, how moving! The moment those words left the god of death's mouth, Yui exploded with energy. A towering pillar of spiritual power erupted from him, just like the day he had first ascended as a superhuman. Amid the roaring energy, he bellowed, "An illusion? You think you can stop me with a mere trick? A fake will never be real." His fury at this mockery of the dead was boundless. "I will not forgive you." His eyes burned with blood-red rage. He knew, logically, that this had to be some kind of trick, but anger was not something so easily controlled. While Yui seethed with hatred, the god of death remained utterly unfazed. "I forgot to mention," he said with a smirk. "This is no illusion. I have fully restored both her body and her soul. She is alive." Annie remained motionless, like a lifeless doll, but the longer Yui stared, the more he noticed the subtle, living details, the slight rise and fall of her chest, the faint tremble in her fingers. The more he looked, the more his spirit wavered. The god of death's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "If you don't believe me, kill her and see for yourself." The energy surrounding Yui began to fade. His back remained straight, his stance unwavering, but the weight of helplessness was unmistakable. If Annie was truly alive, what was he supposed to do? All these years, he had pursued power for one reason alone: to never be powerless again, to never lose another loved one. And now, standing before his daughter, resurrected by the very enemy he despised most, he had no idea what to do.